my drink.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm ready.
Now let's go. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us today. I can't wait to introduce you to my audience, to our audience, and have them, learn about your incredible story, and not just your story, but the way you use your story to help other people work through grief, work through trauma, work through shame. Because really, to me, that's what we're doing here, right? Like I do, of course, share my story, but the goal really is for other people to take what I've learned and apply it to their lives, because that's all I'm doing. I just learned from other people. And that's what I love about your book. It's not just your story, it's your story plus, okay, how can you do this too? Right? How can you leverage my experiences, your experiences, to optimize your life today? And to me, that's the best gift that we can give to other people. So I'm going to start with something a little bit different. I don't normally start this way, but I think it would be really impactful for us to do this. We're going to jump way ahead and then go backwards. Okay, I would like to start with, if you wouldn't mind walking my audience through the day in March. You're a student at Rutgers. You're a collegiate gymnast at Rutgers.
Yep.
And you get this phone call and everything changes for you overnight. Will you just talk to us about what happened?
Yeah. So I'm living out my dream at Rutgers, doing the gymnastics thing on scholarship, something I had worked towards for so many years in my life. And really my parents too, it was something we invested in. And so I'm at Rutgers, I'm studying for exams, I'm living life, I'm doing the college thing. I'm 8 hours from home, but I always had such a close relationship with both of my parents, even when I went to school. And so I remember calling them that night, having a conversation about school and life and all the things, hung up the phone, said, I love yous and goodbye. And that was it. And then I wake up to my phone ringing in the middle of the night, and my dad was on the other end to let me know that my mom died. And it just came as a complete shock, because it's the middle of the night. Mom's 45 years old. We just talked on the phone. Like, what happened? And my dad said, Lauren, I can't explain it now. Get on the next plane you can. And so 18-year-old me is frantically trying to pack my bags, get a plane ticket, get home, do all the things. And then my plane touches down, and I'm thinking, okay, my dad's going to be at the airport to pick me up. He's going to help me make sense of all this. And instead it was my cousin and my uncle who showed up to tell me that my dad too had passed away.
What did you say in the car? You must have been so confused. Were you confused? You had to have been.
Very confused. I mean, very confused, because in that, it's like you want answers, you want to know what happened, like what, making sense of it all. And going back to that moment, I'll tell you this, it's so hard to process, because, this was 22 years ago, and there's moments where it feels like yesterday.
Yeah.
And the way we process trauma and grief is very segmented, right? And so I think back to that day, and I can vividly remember so many details, and thinking about sitting in the seat of that car as my uncle turns around and tells me my dad died too. And just my entire world flipping upside down. But thinking about the chaotic moments that would follow of like, what is my mind telling me, my brain telling me, it was like suddenly this heavy weight. And now it was this grief and really confusion. Like, how am I going to do this life now?
Yeah.
Right? Because this is all I've ever known.
Yeah.
My parents were my two best friends. And honestly, I was 18, but still a baby.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know what I was doing in life. And so processing that was really hard. And then the other layer of that is like, well, what happened?
Right.
And I think that's the big question, right? Like, what happened? And it wasn't as simple as saying like it was an accident or this or that. Like, literally, what happened for me was not answered for years. And you think, well, how does someone live life and not like know and like go there? And it's amazing what we do to protect ourselves. Like I had thoughts about it, but it was really easy for me to just lean into this idea, and I'd manifested it. So I had somewhere read and understood this terminology of respiratory failure.
Okay.
Respiratory failure is obviously a result of an overdose, but most people don't associate the two. So when you say respiratory failure, it's like, oh, no, like, but it was so much easier to say that than overdose.
Totally.
And so that's what I clung on to. And then for my dad, it was heart attack, because like saying, oh, my dad died of respiratory failure, my mom died of respiratory failure, you know, it all kind of sounds the same. And you're like, oh, that's kind of interesting. How did that happen within a few hours of each other? But my dad died of a heart attack, because I justified, oh, well, his heart stopped, because it did.
Mm-hmm.
But his heart stopped because he went into respiratory failure, because he took a lethal amount of fentanyl, which ultimately ended his life. And so it's amazing how your mind can tell you these things and create a narrative that is just so far from, I don't want to say it was far from the truth, because there were glimpses of truth in there.
Yeah, there were glimpses of truth in there. Yeah. It's a veiled way to say it. You know, it's a veiled way to say it. What were you actually told, though? Because you had to have said to your uncle, how? Or did you say to doctors when you got to the hospital, how? And then did they say to you, we think that they overdosed on their prescription medications? Were you told that at some point? Or were you told respiratory failure?
Right away, no. I latched on to respiratory failure. That like is somewhere where I read this.
Okay.
So I knew that my mom had been taking a lot of medication. And so she passed away first. So I remember going to my grandparents' house. We went straight there. So instead of driving to my house in Giles County, we went to my grandparents' house, which was a lot closer to the airport. And again, so much was still happening at my parents' house.
Okay.
You know, I think that my aunt and uncle were probably trying to protect me from
the
reality of walking into that house and knowing like, okay, this is not good. So we went to my grandparents' house, and I think in those moments, like we're just sitting in the unrest of like, they're gone, right? They're gone. They're not coming back. So I think that was kind of like the initial, you know, shock of it all. But the conversations were starting to percolate around the fact that my mom was taking a lot of medication, and that my brain convinced myself that my mom was taking a lot of medication, and because she had to take medication for such a long time and in so many increments, that it put her into respiratory failure just naturally. Oh, naturally, it was just a really potent drug, and like naturally she took a pill, and because she had to take another pill, and this was going on for years, eventually her body just couldn't take it anymore, and it shut things down. So that is what I made myself to believe, because in those conversations that would follow in those next several hours and days and even months, you know, my Auntie Linda and my Uncle Mike, you know, I think were doing their best not to come to me and be like, your parents died of overdose, you know, because I think they were trying to love me through it as well and protect that piece of it. And so it was almost like I just like put on the shield and was like, no, we're not going to talk about it. And it's crazy because I think back to the coroner's report came back 90 days after my parents died. We're pulling into the coroner's office. My aunt says, do you want to go in with me? And I said, no. She comes out with a manila envelope, literally with the death certificates and the toxicology reports and the police reports. And my aunt had already opened it up and said, do you want to see it? And I said, no. And I threw it in the floorboard and never looked back. For 10 years, I would not open those because I knew in my heart, if I did, I would have to face the truth. Right? Because it's in writing. It's fact. And so it's amazing the stories that we can tell ourselves. And it's amazing that I did such a good job of protecting myself, or at least I thought I was protecting myself.
You were.
By like going with this, you know.
I actually think you were, though, because here's what's wild to me about, I mean, a lot of this is, but you go back to, and we'll, when we get there again, and we'll get into the actual like details of you know, of what happened and how they were even on so much medication. But I just want to focus on this for a second. I actually think you were protecting yourself because you go back to Rutgers and you graduate college. You finish, right? You finish. I don't know how you did that. Well, and I think it's because of what you just said. My parents divorced when I was 18. And I was so grief stricken that I didn't finish college. I couldn't put one foot in front of the other. Your parents died. How did you go back and go to school and go to classes? Like, literally, how did you do that? Because also at the same time, the estate is in shambles. They owe money to, right? They're in debt because of this escalating drug problem over the years. How did you get up and go to school and brush your teeth and go to bed? I don't even know how you did that.
It's so funny you asked that, because as you say it to me, I'm like, good question.
I think it was the protection. I think it actually protected you. Because, by the way, everything that you just said to me sounds really logical. That if you take that many pills for that long, at some point your body might shut down. Actually sounds totally possible.
I'm glad that you say that, because I will say this, I went back to Rutgers and I'm with my teammates and people that deeply care about me. And, of course everybody wants to know.
Right.
And that everybody's talking behind closed doors, behind, I don't want to say behind my back because that sounds bad, but you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, conversations are happening when I'm not in the room.
Totally.
And it's interesting because you say that. So my trainer, Kathy Galley, she was, she's our athletic trainer. So she's the one taping us up, keeping us healthy, doing all the things, lecturing us when we need to slow down, that sort of thing. And it's crazy because she's a medical professional. And yet many times conversations would get brought up. I'd be on this table. She'd be taping me up. And yet she never corrected me, never questioned my story, never questioned what I was saying. And was never like raising an eyebrow to like, that's interesting that her mom died of respiratory failure, and that she's, what caused the respiratory failure? Because there's another layer to that, right?
Right.
And then, the whole heart attack thing, which I think is believable, because when you think about it, like, people talk about heartbreak so many times, like a spouse passes away and 6 months later, totally. The other one dies of heartbreak. But, a lot of times you hear that happening in maybe more elderly folks, yes. That like their timeline, they've come to the end of that timeline. Yeah. So naturally they die of heartbreak, but really it's just their body's telling them they're ready to go and, right. and being called to the good Lord above, or whatever. And so for me, I just kind of said that because it did seem logical. And I've since, obviously, in writing the book, have talked to many of these people along the way of like, well, what did you think? Like, how did this all process in your mind? And my trainer said, like, who was I to sit there and like, attack or question right. your story?
Right.
Like, who was I to be like, well, Lauren, that sounds a little fishy. Maybe we need to unpack this. Like, that's not the time and the place to do that, And so I would be curious, and maybe this is a conversation that I could have deeply with my teammates, because I think they would be brutally honest with me. But I would be curious to know, like, hey, to some of my close teammates, when this all happened, like, what not only what did you think, but what were the conversations
right.
that you remember having?
Yeah. Did
digging
you,
into that?
Totally. Did you say the medication part or just respiratory failure? Because the medication part is legit too. You could have said, my mother was sick.
If I recall, I do think it was both.
Okay.
Because I did mention the medication. But here's the thing. I was painting a picture that my mom was in a lot of pain, because she was. Painting that picture that it was all prescribed and she was doing exactly what she was supposed to. And so in painting that picture, then when you say respiratory failure, then I think in a lot of ways it's to the person receiving that information is like, oh no, like this, what a tragic, almost freak accident, or what a tragic thing that this medication ultimately took her life because it was too strong, or again, like you said, her body just shut down. Yeah. It wasn't responsive anymore to the medication, or, her body obviously couldn't take that pressure. So I think that it all made sense, totally. Because I did tie the medication, and I did talk about like, oh, my parents were in a lot of pain. And then the heart attack thing was just easy for me. Yeah. And then I think the heart attack thing was just so easy.
And then also you throw in the stigma of addiction and fentanyl, you think someone, like a homeless kid under a bridge doing fentanyl, and you look at you, nobody would have tied together the idea. And this is one of the reasons why you share and you wrote this book, is because it can happen to anyone, which is your whole message, right? But also, I feel like with your parents, they were definitely direct victims. I think certainly your mother, of the Sackler family opiate epidemic that they contributed to, obviously, that they manufactured. But at that time, nobody really knew about that. You didn't even know about that. That wasn't like a thing that had come out yet. But like I said, we jumped kind of ahead. I want to go back a bit to your upbringing, which was stable and good and nice, right? I mean, everything was, what was your family like? What were the dynamics like in the home?
Yeah. The dynamics were good, again, gymnastics was my life, and my parents made sure I was at practice. I was where I needed to be. I was at gymnastics competitions, and gymnastics is not a cheap sport. Yeah. And my parents were not financially thriving. You mentioned the unrest that we had financially. Now, outwardly appearances, it seemed like, oh, they're doing okay. Right. We had built our house out in the country. What my parents, it was a modest, 2,000 square foot house, but all brand new. And, it was my parents' dream home. And, that ended up creating a whole bunch of financial unrest because everything went over the budget, and you're having to string, power up the mountain, and this is going to cost a fortune. And there's 1,000 things that started to kind of compound. But I will say that those were all things that were not like made known to me or my brother. It was like, okay, like moving on, we're just doing life. And I knew that, at times finances were a struggle, but I didn't know the magnitude of it. Like when I didn't know my parents were stroking $10 checks to the power company, right? Just to keep the lights on. Like, just, hey, here's a little bit now. We'll get paid up at the end of the month. Okay. Like, I didn't know that. Yeah. Because my parents were so put together. And I think in such a way, and I want to circle back to what you said about back then not knowing. So 2003 is when they died. That was at the very forefront, the beginning of this opioid epidemic, when it kind of hit headlines, right? Okay. So we were starting to see the headlines percolate. But, my parents presented themselves in a way that outwardly nobody would have looked at and been like, oh, something's amiss here. Now, hindsight's 2020, and I think that myself, along with other friends, coaches, teammates, would be able to say, oh, well, I remember this about them. But 99% of what people remember about my parents is like loving, happy, compassionate, joyful, just wrapped their arms around me and my brother and like took us where we needed to go. And so I think that is the part that stumps a lot of people, because they're like, okay, how was this going on? But then too, you mentioned the Purdue Pharma, the Sackler family deal. The specifics in terms of the amount of drugs that were in our house prescribed to my parents at one given time, you would be shook. And I all prescribed to them in their name. So there was nothing illegal happening.
Even at the end, because that's what I wanted to ask you too. So even at the end, that was their own stuff that they overdosed on? That was her own stuff?
I will say this. Mom was prescribed fentanyl. Dad was not prescribed fentanyl. He was prescribed Oxy. Okay. So he was on his Oxycontin regimen. She was on fentanyl because she could not manage the Oxys anymore. So the doctor was like, well, hey, let's up it up. Let's up the dose. Let's do fentanyl, right? So she's taking the pain patch. Well, the pain patch isn't a time release. Okay. And so they were both taking their prescriptions as prescribed. They're also both sucking on the fentanyl suckers. Breakthrough pain. That was a big thing. And those were out in the open. I mean, people saw them in public, sucking on them all the time. But there was never a question, because they were prescribed them, and they were taking them as prescribed. And so what's interesting, so my dad did overdose on fentanyl as well as my mom. So in theory, he overdosed on her prescription. Okay. But here's the thing. The way they overdosed too, because the patch is a time release pain patch. Well, both of my parents ingested it.
They ate it.
They ate it, yes.
Okay.
And so they put it in the freezer and ingested it. So at that point, they've already crossed the line
of
ultimately not taking the drug as prescribed. So, because you do hear sometimes of, and I think it's kind of rare, but sometimes these patches can leak into the bloodstream, even if they are adhered the way they're supposed to be. Okay. And ultimately people can overdose that way. I've heard that before, but I think that's a very uncommon situation. My dad literally read online that you could take the patch, put it in the freezer and suck on it and get the instant high. And he actually overdosed at Thanksgiving by doing that, and admitted that he read it online. It did what it said it would do. And, I think he knew the risk associated. My mom knew the risk associated. I don't know if I have no idea. And I don't think there's a way for us to know, but when my mom overdosed and died, if that was the first time she had actually done exactly what my dad had done, which is put the fentanyl in the freezer and suck on the patch. We don't know if that was her first time doing it. So let's get honest. My parents knew the risks. I think anytime you take a prescription drug and alter the way it's taken, or take more, double the dose or crush it up or whatever it is, you have to know there's a risk. And I know that my parents knew there was a risk, but they were so far down this dark hole of addiction that the risks were far less than what the reward would be, which is, I need the high, my body needs it, I've got to have it, I got to have it now.
Also, this is going to sound insane to a non-addict.
No, but I want to hear it, because I love to hear that perspective, because it's so important, because I do everything I can to try to understand.
You kind of don't know that. You kind of don't think there's a risk, because you're consuming it every single. So I was an actual heroin IV user, and people have said to me before, well, weren't you afraid you were going to die? And I'm like, no. It just doesn't seem like you're going to overdose. And I think it's because you're already doing, it's like the frog in boiling water, right? When it just gets hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. Like, it does not seem on any conscious intellectual level there's a risk, there's a fatal risk here. It never felt that way to me ever. It didn't matter what size the shot was. Of course, I knew that other people overdosed and died.
But not you.
No, no, it never seemed to me like that was actually going to happen. And it probably didn't seem that way to them either. I mean, obviously, they wouldn't have done it.
And you mentioned too, because in a lot of ways you build up a tolerance.
Yes,
right?
Totally.
And so you're building on that, and you're like, well, I've done all these things and I'm not dead yet.
Right.
So
yeah.
And I think that invincibility piece plays into it as well. It is interesting when you go deep there, because I do, in a lot of ways, wonder what was going through my parents' mind in the last waking hours of their lives. And here's the thing, I'll unpack this for you. So, and the book really details this in very vivid detail, which we had to spend a lot of time uncovering, because let me tell you, when I finally 10 years later, opened up the tox reports, there's 3 paragraphs that describe the events of what happened that night. 3 paragraphs. Are you kidding me? How is that supposed to explain anything?
Yeah.
It took meeting several people in the process to explain it. People that I never in a million years thought I would meet. And then they're like, well, I actually was there. So the deputy.
Oh, okay.
Was the deputy that, the whole thing's crazy. It's insane, but I definitely call it, very divine in so many ways, because it really, it pointed me back towards this traumatic story. And while I'll never have all the answers, and while the answers aren't the key to healing necessarily, I think in a lot of ways there's something to be said about, I wouldn't say the answers aren't the key to being healed, right, but the answers can be the key to lead to healing.
They help.
The process of healing.
Information helps. Definitely.
Information helps. Yeah. So my dad found my mom on the porch, slumped over. He always fell asleep on the couch, and then woke up in the middle of the night and went to the bed. And he woke up and could not find her anywhere. So he's walking around the house trying to find her, goes outside, finds her slumped over on the porch. tries to bring her inside, tries with all his might to bring her back because he was convinced she was still breathing. And I also think, and again, I can't fully answer this question, but I think in a lot of ways he thought, well, I can fix this and then we don't have to let the secret out of the bag.
Right.
If I don't call anybody, then I can bring her back. We'll get her. She'll be okay.
Absolutely.
But I think at that point she had already been long gone.
Okay.
By the time he had found her. I don't think there was any bringing her back, but I think he tried his very, very best and then very quickly called the rescue squad at that point, realizing that it wasn't going to happen. So with that, they come, they show up, they do everything they can to try to bring her back. Obviously, the end result is they aren't able to. So then she goes to the hospital. They take her to the hospital. He goes to the hospital to take care of everything he needs to. And then he comes back home and he's on the phone with LifeNet. They're basically, it's an organ donation group. They're talking to him about that. They're also trying to help. So my brother was stationed in the military. Well, my dad just could not get in touch with my brother, and him, they're super tight. And I know that my dad was desperately trying to get in touch with my brother to let him know what happened, to get him home, everything. And while he was on the phone with LifeNet, he excused himself from the phone, I think to get my brother's social security number or whatever. And when he excused himself from the phone, I guess the woman suddenly could hear very loud breathing on the other side, like snoring type breathing. And that's when she knew he never came back to the phone. And at that point he had collapsed in the kitchen and was going into respiratory failure. And that's when she called the local sheriff's department and said, hey, I think we've got an emergency. Somebody's got to get out there. And by the time they made it out there, he was already gone.
Whoa.
Yeah. So a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. So I wonder if and first of all, also, thank you for sharing all of this. I know that it was a long time before you did, and that disclosure is part of healing, but I also know it's still vulnerable, and I just also really appreciate you sharing any of this, so
yeah, absolutely. It is healing, but I mean it definitely rips open the wound
for sure.
Every time I talk about it, I have to take myself back there.
Yeah.
I was not in the house. I was at Rutgers. My brother was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia, so neither one of us were in the house to witness anything that happened.
Yeah.
But it's insane how my mind can literally just take me into that house and envision every single detail of what happened.
Do you think that and I know you're just guessing, when he got home, before he got on the phone with the organ place, do you think he grabbed one of those suckers and then got on the phone?
So, what happened is, there was, the suckers were all over the house.
Okay.
But those were for breakthrough pain, and those you could not overdose on.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think. I mean, there's probably always a chance that you could take too much, but I think it was such a small amount because those were intended wear the patch and suck the sucker,
yeah.
Next level. But I will say this, he did, yes, in fact, because there apparently were stacks of those fentanyl patches in the freezer. So apparently he did ingest a lethal amount because his toxicology reports indicated as such.
Okay.
And, I'm not even entirely sure if they found the wrapper or whatever, or the patch with him. But I know that they did for my mom because she had aspirated on it. So they'd actually found it in her throat.
But the wrapper.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The actual patch she had aspirated on when she had sucked on it.
Okay.
So they knew that that's what happened. Right. And then my dad ultimately had the same, similar levels of fentanyl in his bloodstream.
Okay.
I think what happened, and I mean, if we're in the business of unpacking right now, I'll just go ahead and say this, because we're getting real here. I think a lot of people, including myself, question okay, well, my mom overdosed. I think 100% accidentally overdosed. I did always question, well, what about my dad? He was obviously distraught. He was obviously sad. He was obviously heartbroken. Maybe it was the end for him. Maybe he felt he couldn't go on because my mom was like the glue. And I always knew that, it would be a challenge when one parent goes and the other is left to live without the other. but it's interesting because I did question in many ways, like, and here's the thing, addiction is hard to talk about just as suicide is, right? And so not only addiction is a choice of, and I say a choice in the sense that while my parents did not choose addiction, I know that my parents like chose to put the patch in the freezer because they needed that high, right? So they like, I think I struggled with that for a very long time, knowing that like my parents altered the way it was prescribed to them because they had to have it like they had to have it. And I think I struggle with that. But then I did struggle with, even though they were both ruled accidental overdoses, like, did my dad intentionally want to end it all? And I will say this, and I think that just from this book and the healing that has come from it, the conversations. So I met the deputy that responded that day, and I met him in the craziest way. So I'm going to tell you this. In the high school, I'm speaking to the high school, having this is 19 years after they passed away, talking to the high schoolers back at my own high school in all the fields. 8th grader goes home to dad, this ESPN reporter was at the school, and his dad happened to be the deputy and remembers that day very vividly. And so now I get reconnected to him. That's how I've now pieced together what used to be 3 paragraphs. Like this is how I pieced it all together, because he was in the house. He walked in, he visibly saw my dad and what was in the house and the fentanyl sucker wrappers and everything. And he told me, Lauren, I was young. I was 32 years old. I hadn't seen a whole lot. I was still new in my career. We all thought it was suicide. Like, we all thought your dad committed suicide. But he said, knowing what I know now, he worked on the drug task force for about 8 years. He said, knowing what I know now, knowing what addiction is and what happens, he said, I know and I feel very deeply in my heart that your dad did not intentionally take his life, because he did everything he could to get you and your brother home. Yeah. He literally died with the phone in his hands. And if this is someone that was just trying to end it all, what would the purpose of even worrying about me and my brother?
None.
At that point.
Or the organ people. I mean, that's like a task that you take in the busyness of life. Not when you're choosing to step aside and step away from the busyness of life. That's in the mix of it. That's when you're putting things together still. So I totally agree with that too.
And I think it takes me back to what you just said, that I'm just that's kind of weighing on me right now. The idea of the choice, right? Like, in the risk, because in my mind I'm thinking, well, dad literally he knows what happened to my mom. Because at this point, they've been doing this for a while. And whether it was my mom's first time or not her first time having ingested the fentanyl the way she did, they knew. He knew what she was up to. She knew what he was up to. Mm-hmm. They were in this together. So there was no question in his mind what had happened that night to my mom, I believe. He knew. So in my mind, I'm like, well, you put that in the freezer, you take that medication, like, you have to know that the very thing that happened to my mom could also happen to you. But in hearing you kind of talk about that, when you were so distraught, just so eaten up with the addiction, your mind is not telling you, oh, wait a sec.
Not at all. Not at all. Also, they'd probably done that before. She might have even passed out before.
We do know my dad did, because he did overdose at Thanksgiving.
Oh, that's right. You'd said that.
Survived, right? So we did know my dad did. I don't know about my mom. Right. I don't know if she did or not. But she was aware, because my dad fessed up and said, well, this is what I did.
Yeah.
So. No,
you never think that that's going to be the outcome. You just don't. That's why multiple people can die in the same house of an overdose. You know what I mean? Because it's like, in fact, addicts too, if you know a batch of several people overdosed, you'll go try to buy that. Not because you think you're going to die, but because you think it's really good and your tolerance has gotten so high. So people will purposely seek out heroin or fentanyl that they know has been targeting the community. We did. Yeah. I definitely did. I didn't use fentanyl. I was clean before that really became a thing. But for heroin, certainly. So I want to also address, though, how were they both even on fentanyl and prescribed it? So that piece makes sense. What are the injuries that led to that?
Yeah. So my mom, I know we're unpacking a lot here, aren't we? we're going real deep, and a lot of this is in the book, but I will tell you, some of what I just talked about with the suicide piece of it is not. But here's the thing. So my mom had degenerative disc disease, and so she had started go seeing. So they died in 2003, and she had her first surgery in 1999, a neck fusion, and then the neck fusion turned into another neck fusion. So she was going to see a neurosurgeon, getting help with the pain she was experiencing. So that obviously resulted in the two surgeries. Well, as she was being discharged from this doctor's office, the secretary literally said, well, my husband goes to this pain management doctor. Maybe it's something you could try out, And I guess at that time you didn't have to have like a script or like a referral. It was just like, okay, I don't know how that process worked or works now, specifically, but it was just a recommendation. So mom's dealing with that. And then my dad, he had chronic back pain. He had one of those permanent TENS unit in his back, the ones with the little zinger that, he could turn on and it would vibrate and it kind of, provide some relief. And then also PTSD. My dad was in the military. He served 5 years. He was stationed in Cuba. That's where I was born. And so I know he had to do some stuff and, was dealing with the PTSD of his service in the military. And so those were known issues. And my dad was an alcoholic. And so that was also a known issue. 10-year-old, 11, 12-year-old me didn't know what alcoholism was, had no idea. It was really good at compartmentalizing. So, it wasn't, in my mind, it was, a setback here and there, but nothing that would result in this journey that my parents took. Yeah. And so they both went to the same pain management doctor, and Oxycontin was what they were prescribed. And you talk about that. We talk about the amount of narcotics in the house at that given time. Part of that was because my dad worked for the VA, the Salem VA. So he worked for the federal government, and his insurance policy, 90-day supply of Oxycontin because it's cheaper, right? We're gonna mail you 90 days of Oxycontin. So at one point, both of my parents were prescribed that and taking the Oxycontin. Okay. Well, now all of a sudden you've got 60 pills in your hands in one given moment. Like that could be a recipe for disaster for an addict. Yeah. But I don't think back then they knew that.
They definitely didn't, because they were saying it wasn't a problem and
addictive.
Yeah. They were saying it wasn't addictive. And you actually, if you don't mind sharing about this, you were a part of that lawsuit, right? You got involved in the lawsuit, correct?
Yes. And the ongoing lawsuit, because it has not been settled because of the bankruptcy claim.
Okay.
I've actually been kind of waiting for updates and, kind of seeing what that looks like. Because I'll be honest with you, I'm actually hopeful to get a foundation set up in, my parents' name and the Sisler family name. And, I've thought about that, even if it's just a small sum of money to be able to use that to help someone, that's still here.
How did you hear about the lawsuit and then think, oh, that's what happened to my parents? Do you remember how that came into your awareness?
I want to say my auntie Linda might have said something. Because I want to say that either there was something circulating, whether it was digitally, like possibly like a news article, like a newspaper, something online that she had seen. And I know at one point there were some, you see those commercials sometimes that say, hey, if you've been impacted by whatever. And so, because, I will say a lot of times I did get asked the question, why did you not sue the doctor? Why did you not try to sue the, the doctor for overprescribing or for being negligent? And my uncle, who is an ER doctor and has been in the medical field for a very long time, I think it was just kind of decided upon not to waste resources because our resources were very limited. And oh, by the way, I've got to get back to school and try to get back my feet back under me. I think the fear was like, you could spend all this money and drag this thing out. The emotional toll that it could have potentially taken on me could have absolutely just destroyed me. So I don't know that he, along with others, felt that it was worth fighting in a sense that what is there to gain? Because chances are you'll probably lose the case because at the end of the day, my parents still took the medication, not as prescribed.
Right.
So I think there was some of that went into it. But then with the Purdue Pharma thing, even though my parents died of fentanyl, they're still very much a part of that case because it started with oxy.
Totally.
And then basically that's kind of how they determine. So, and this is for also survivors, people that are in recovery are also part of this lawsuit, because these are people that their lives have been altered significantly because of this drug, and being told, being, the falsified claims of like the non-addictive part of it. And I think it does beg the question with the doctors, how many of them and how much did they know? How much did they know these reports were not, they were fudging these graphs and these reports and all these things? And I have a lot of questions about that. Who was operating within the guidelines, and who were the outliers that were not operating within the guidelines, and who were not really operating with that moral compass,
right?
Because I think you have a lot of both.
Absolutely.
And I don't know with my parents' doctor what the moral compass was and what his thoughts were and all of that. But I will say, my parents were very put together, and they showed up to their doctor's appointments, and and I don't think they gave anybody an indication that they were addicted. And I think that's the hard part, because I don't know what your lifestyle looked like when you were actively using, but I sure know that like my parents, it was very hidden.
No, I was I was homeless. My face was picked apart. It was very, very obvious, So when you went back to college, I kind of want to revisit that. It just is so incredible to me that you were able to finish, because now you also had to because they were helping you pay for college. I know they had to take out loans, stuff you didn't know. How did you figure out the estate and deal with that stuff? I guess you had to sell the house and then go to school and go to college and keep going to classes. Like, I literally don't know how you had the fortitude and the strength to do that. Was it just that compartmentalization?
Yeah. You asked that question earlier, and I feel like I kind of got off on probably a totally different, tangent here, but, it's crazy because I do feel like, I go back, and I think part of it is you're in shock initially, right? So shock is kind of the thing that allows you to just like kind of almost operate as a shell of yourself, because you're not feeling all the feels necessarily. I mean, you're feeling it, but you're also able to escape the reality of it. You get really good at doing that for a while. And I got really good at doing that for a while. And then I think the reality started setting in, especially that first summer you mentioned. We go back home, we're standing in the living room, my brother and I, and like everything is repossessed. There is no will. Cars are repossessed. The house went into foreclosure. I mean, everything gone. So, then all of a sudden you're starting to see the tangible memories disappear, the things that you once held on to that you don't have anymore. So that stuff started to weigh on me. But I do think, and it's something I'm still trying to unpack with my therapist, is like, why was I so good at compartmentalizing things? And I honestly think that I was trained at a very early age. And I think some of it was gymnastics, it was the sport. It was, gymnastics is such an individual sport. You get up, you compete, you fall down, you get back up, you keep going. Like, this is on you. You don't have like 10 other guys out there on the field to carry the load. Like, this is on you.
Right.
And so it is a constant battle, constant process of like, compartmentalize, box it up, put it on a shelf, forget about it, move on. And I think you can get really good at that. And I saw that manifest in my actual real life outside of gymnastics even with my dad's alcoholism, like and of course he's my dad and I loved him dearly, but it was almost like my ability to just forgive and forget, constant, over and over and over again. I think I just was so conditioned to be able to do that. And so, and I think even sometimes today, I realize I'm conditioned to do that. And sometimes I have to like slow down. I mean, my husband, even in just some recent stuff we've been walking through, he's like, Lauren, like, you don't have to tough it out. Like, take a beat here, and I don't think I'm very good at that.
Well, you're obviously very, very high achieving, high performing, because it's difficult to become an ESPN SEC reporter. Like, you have experienced like incredible career success. That's really hard to do. You know, I like, you know, we were mentioning my friend Dawn earlier. Like, it's incredible that you guys did that. And so you were able to put together this incredible career while this had happened, one of the most traumatic things I've ever even heard of happening to a human being at 18 years old. So you obviously are very high achieving, very high performing. I think all of that is like awe-inspiring, something to be celebrated. At what point did you start to think, when did you start saying, I need to talk about this, I need to open that toxicology report? What made you open it and read it 10 years later?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you for your words of encouragement there, because I think sometimes it does get lost on me. I'm like, oh, you know, like, yeah, I work for
No,
ESPN.
it's incredible. And the
I'm just
SEC in
like, oh,
particular. I
yeah.
mean,
Well, it just means more, right?
it's
You
the
know.
pinnacle. Yeah, absolutely. And as
Oh,
a woman, I mean, it's like, do you know how many people want to do that? A lot of
I
people want to be
know.
SEC football sideline reporters. You got to do it. It's incredible.
I know, and I will say it's never lost on me how grateful I am, but a lot of times it's lost on me
The
how
work you had to put in.
the work I had to put in
Yeah.
of like, wait a sec, like I was the odds were stacked against me without a doubt. Yeah, so I appreciate that. So what kind of turned the page for me? I will say this. So I moved here to Alabama in 2011. I got, you know, essentially recruited. You know, you send out your resume tape, hope someone takes a chance. There was a job opening at the CBS affiliate here in Birmingham, and I remember as I'm kind of taking that job, and once again still kind of living that lie, that sugar coated lie. At this point, though, I will say that I'd finally allowed this story to be out in the open, but it was still very selective.
Okay.
And what I mean by that, at about year 7, I remember working at a TV station in Parkersburg, West Virginia, and my auntie Linda came to visit, and one of my colleagues came over, and they were I was in the kitchen kind of bouncing around cooking and walking back and forth, and my colleague had started to dig in with my auntie Linda, like, hey, you know, like about my parents and the story. And my aunt started to share the story truthfully, and I was never okay with that. When she would start leaning into the story, I would just, fisticuffs, girl. I would literally just want to, you know, like, no, you're attacking them. I would get angry. But for once, I finally just kind of let her talk. And it was sort of the start, just the first step in being okay with this story and the reality of what actually happened. Okay. But I'm not out here necessarily publicizing it, but at least I'm starting to sit with it. And then at the 10-year mark, so I'm here in Alabama, I had gotten the job here in Birmingham. I think I just started realizing, like, I'm still living with this shame. I'm trying to escape this thing. I'm trying to run from it. And oh, by the way, it keeps coming back and smacking me in the face. And I think that conversations were starting to happen. You would see and hear them more and more. Oh, you know, this overdose, this doctor getting busted, you know, this, and the opioid epidemic is on the rise. And I think conversations were starting to be had. And then it's like all of a sudden I'm like, okay. And slowly but surely having those conversations in smaller groups, and then seeing the response was not nearly as scary and hurtful as I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Like, oh, wait a sec. You know, this isn't so bad. And then almost the freedom that I started to experience when I would say, you know, Janine, like this thing, this is what happened. It would be scary in the moment. And all of a sudden I would be like, oh, what a relief. Like, I'm good. You know, I'm fine. I'm good. And I think things really took off because I'd actually been connected with a dear friend who I call my Birmingham mom, Beverly McClendon. She does a lot of mentoring out at the Foundry, which is a, you know, faith-based recovery program, year-long program for men and women. And it is like absolute rock bottom. Like, this is last resort. And she was doing a lot of mentoring out there. And I realized, like, oh, wow, like maybe this would be a good opportunity for me to understand, to be with someone that's walked through it, that's walking through it, that's trying to find recovery, trying to find hope and redemption. And it just opened my eyes to this whole other world. And I think that is what really started that process of like understanding and exploring, and the curiosity, and even the almost drive to unpack as much as I possibly could, because for so many years I had it packed away on a shelf in the darkness where nobody could see it.
Yeah. Wow. So the book is called Shatterproof. What is the Shatterproof mentality, the mindset?
Yeah. So good. So, Shatterproof actually came up the way, we kind of came up with this title. And I say we, so, my publisher and, our team of people, as we're kind of going through like titles and all the things. A friend of ours that was helping in the project, Gary, had said, it's like someone takes a baseball bat to your life and shatters it into a million pieces. And yet you've proven through your resilience, your courage, your strength, your grit, that you can take those pieces and piece them back together into something beautiful and to create a life of joy and purpose, right? And so that's kind of where Shatterproof came from, is that like literally your life can be in a million pieces and yet you have the ability to pick it back up. And I think you are a walking testament to that, right? You too are a walking testament to that. And I think so many people listening to this are a walking testament. It doesn't always look pretty, no, but I think in life we just have this vision of how things are supposed to go.
Yeah.
And they never go that way.
Yeah.
Ever. For anybody. And I think there's a lot of disappointments that will continue to beat you down over and over and over again. But I think that in facing this thing head on and recognizing my ability to become shatterproof, I've walked through a lot of things in life, and even beyond losing both of my parents, I've lost a lot in my life, and even most recently in November, I lost my brother, and basically like, he was it. It was me, him, and my mom and my dad. And it just almost seems like another gut punch. That, that's what life does to us. And it's not to say, and this is the thing I want to reiterate to people. You're not broken, you're human. And so when you think about walking through these challenges in life, it's not a matter of like never falling, because we're all going to fall. It's not a matter of never facing adversity or never cracking under the pressure of it all, but it's rising through it when those things do happen. And looking at the timeline, it might be different for everybody. Yeah. It might be different for every situation you face, but giving yourself the grace to say, you know what, like, I am going to get through this. It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but I'm going to get through this. And being able to reflect on that when you do, in fact, get to the other side.
Well, I love the idea, too, what you just said of shattered, it's in a million pieces, and you put it back together into something new. And so it's not that you can't be shattered. It's not that you can't take hits. It's that we can always pick up the pieces and create something new. I mean, that's a beautiful idea. It's not saying, oh, I'm shatterproof, I can never be affected. Absolutely, I can be affected, but then I can rebuild. And I heard that one. So my husband was relapsing for a while a few years ago, and I heard something about like trust, and you think you really need to be able to trust the person, and that puts everything on him. I have to be able to trust him. And it's like, no, what I really need to be able to do is trust myself, that no matter what happens, I will get through it. I will pick up the pieces as I always have. And that's something that's in our own control. How can someone take their own story, their own trauma, and become shatterproof?
That's good. I think my advice and my encouragement to people is, number one, to step into the truth. Just be in it. See it, acknowledge it, own it. And the truth with that comes your story. And so, my mantra and what I really, put a bow on this idea with is fall in love with your story. Because I think that it requires us to truly fall in love with our story, to take full ownership of who we are, where we've come from, where we're at now, and the ups and downs in life, and recognize that's all part of the story. Yeah. And so when I even think about my parents' legacy, and how I'm going to share that with my son one day, I think it's easy for us to put the highlight reel together and be like, hey, this is it. But actually, it's also equally as important to show the hard, the tough, the challenging. And I think that's where I would encourage you, is to pull the curtains back on all of that, right? Because it is, it's important for us to step into it, to see it, and to recognize that we can use this as a tool for strength, and to not break us, but to build us, right? You mentioned that, rebuilding. And I think that's so important. And so that would just be my encouragement, is to find the courage and the strength to name your story, to name the truth, and then to step into that and ultimately learn to fall in love with your story. And it takes time. It takes courage. It takes, several goes at it, right? Wow. To be able to truly do that. And there will be times that you can fall in love with your story, and then moments where you're like, well, this freaking sucks. Yeah. Been there, done that, a time or 10. Right. But you will start to find this freedom. And that's what we talk about, the shackles of shame, is you break free from those shackles of shame when you start to step into the truth and start to own your story and fall in love with your story. And I think there's so much freedom that comes with that. And it's such a gift. And it's a gift that when I meet people that I can just see are struggling and combating that so deeply, I'm like, I just want to box this up and like give it to you, for you to open up and to just find that courage and strength to do that. And so that's really what I hope people can learn from this, and to know wherever you're walking in life. And the other thing is too, we love to compare, like, well, my life, I've gone through this, and this person went through this, and your situation is valid no matter what it is. Yeah. And so drop the comparisons. Your situation is not better or worse. It is. It just is. And so I would just encourage that, because we're constantly fighting that piece of it, and also saying, well, I don't think I can get through it because I went through this thing and that person went through this thing and they were able to get through it, but mine's totally different. Right. Yes, it looks different in so many ways, but a lot of those key pieces and those things that you're walking through, everybody could raise their hand and say, me too. Yeah. Somewhere in life. And that's the beauty of humanity and connection, is that we've all walked through similar circumstances. Now it's deciding how you're going to respond to it. Yeah. And I think that can be such a gift when you learn that the response is just as important, if not more important, than the fall itself. Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. And actually, I was wrong. I have 2 more questions, quick ones. Okay. Because I haven't heard anybody ask you this on and I listened to several interviews. What is your relationship with alcohol? Do you drink? Has it ever concerned you? Yeah. Interesting you say that. So I actually made a choice back when I was 15, never to drink, never to do drugs, never smoked, never done anything. And you never have? No. Like, I've tasted alcohol and it repulses me. Like, I'm literally like, ugh. Wow. And I realize a lot of people are like, oh, you just build up a tolerance to it. Well, I just have no desire to do that, because I'm like, I've already made it to 40 years old. Like, yeah, who cares? Yeah, who cares? Oh, but I made that choice a long time ago, and I'm grateful. I think a lot of it was gymnastics. I had that locked in focus. Yeah. But here's the thing. I wasn't like a goody two shoes. Like, I was out partying and like, out late, blowing curfew, hanging out with kids that were drinking and smoking and doing all the things. But I just, it wasn't something that interested me. And I still, to this day, like, I went back to Rutgers and it was all staring me right in the face. It could have been the best coping mechanism for me, but I'm so grateful that I just didn't turn to it and didn't think that it was something that would benefit me. Wow. And so, I made that choice long before I even had a real true grasp on what addiction was. And the acknowledgement that my parents were battling it. So interesting. Here I am. Interesting. And I'm grateful for it. Okay. Because it could have definitely taken me in a different direction. Yeah. So that is my relationship with it. And I'm around it. And like I said, I don't, you know, I don't go preaching to everybody like, oh, you shouldn't.
Yeah,
drink.
no, clearly I haven't heard it in a single interview, and I listened to like 5 of them.
Yeah.
So I didn't even know that. Yeah. So you don't talk about it. That's crazy.
And I'm around it. And my husband will drink a beer or two here and there. And,
that's wild.
He's not a huge drinker, but he's, he'll enjoy a drink here and there. And same with my family and stuff like that. But, I think my goal is to bring awareness, but ultimately meet the person where they're at in their journey. And if alcohol or substance is part of that, then, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And help you to unlock those shackles of shame and find your way in a world where you feel valued and worthy and loved.
Your brother, because I remember that's why we canceled the first time. That had just happened. Mm-hmm. How are you with that now? Because he was your last relative.
Yeah.
Are you open to sharing what happened?
Yeah. So, my brother, it's something I'm still unpacking, because my therapist has given me the kind of hey, you don't have to put a microphone to something you're still processing.
Yeah.
But I will say, I have shared, a little bit more about his story and journey. He was dealing with some health issues, and ultimately, he did struggle with some PTSD issues as well. He was in the military. And there is a lot to unpack there for another day, and something, again, I'm still processing. But with his health issues paired with his long-term alcohol use, unfortunately, 42 years old, and that became his story. Yeah. And so just really hard because, again, you just see this amazing life that gets dampened by the enemy and the things that I think, he loved his country. He loved fighting for his country, and he loved, he loved life. He had such a love for life, but he also was the kind of person that was like, if there's not a risk associated with it, screw it. I didn't want nothing to do with it. That was him. And so, for him, it was living life to its fullest. And I think he took full advantage of that, especially when he was in the Navy and he was doing his deployments and he was fighting for our country. But I also think that, he fought also a lot of inner demons and things that he struggled with for many years that he struggled to face. And I think in a lot of ways he battled similar things as my parents with the shame and the things that he, carried with him for a long time. And so, it's been hard because I think there's still so much I want to know there and understand. And, I think that probably in a lot of ways, like I did with my parents and their story, I will go on a soul searching journey at some point. I think I already am, but, I think that I am definitely trying to seek out a better understanding of the why and the how. So, it's been hard. It's been a heavy weight. It's been almost a year. In November 8th, it'll be a year since we lost him. And so I'm definitely in a place right now where I'm carrying a pretty heavy weight with all of it and just trying to, unpack it all. But also knowing that like I've got to give myself time and grace to walk through it as well.
This will be the for real last question. It just came to me. What do you do to take care of yours? Because you were showing back up again very shortly after that. You emailed me within a week to say like, oh, I'm so sorry I had to cancel. And I was like, oh my God, it's okay. What is your self-care look like for you with like physical, mental, emotional? Do you meditate? Do you pray? Do you work out? What encompasses your self-care? Because I think it would be helpful for people to share whatever your routine is. It's obviously helping you process some stuff even before you get to the actual nuts and bolts of it. You're able to take care of yourself somehow.
Yeah. That's also been a process. I will say, because I jumped right back into it. I took 1 week off from college football and then I was right back in it. And again, I think sometimes that's me telling myself to just tough it out, keep going. I thrive in that chaos, I think, a lot of times. But, for me, I will say as a woman of faith, prayer has been really big for me. Okay. finding that prayer time, that solitude, in my relationship with God, and, continuing the connections I've had. And I think in a lot of ways, I have been back on the stage. I've been back out doing a lot of speaking events and, tied to my, messaging and whatnot. But for me, I think that the self-care, I haven't always been great at it, I'll be honest with you. Because again, I think just going is what I think self-care is. Oh, just keep busy, keep busy. But allowing myself to just be in it. And I'm starting to realize that more and more how important that is, especially when I do come off stage and I just spent an hour unpacking my story and the trauma and the tragedy and all the things. Like, Lauren, you got to give yourself time, and healing. And so I would say prayer's been big. Therapy. I've been in therapy for many, many years and continue. And it's been a consistent, very consistent for me and very important. And so, just trying to be in that space has been important. And then just the physical piece of it, getting back out there, playing tennis, working out, getting in the gym, I think is important too. So, I would say those are probably the big key elements of my self-care. And also just being so intentional with my relationships with people has been so important, and gravitating towards the connections that have significant meaning and impact, and really leaning into those relationships that aren't just surface level, but that carry a lot of weight, has been important for me too.
I love that. I don't think anybody has given the answer of leaning into relationships as part of self-care, but that seems so obvious now that you say it. That's a great one.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Lauren. I'm so glad that we were able to connect, and I just am in awe of you, and really, and I could talk to you forever about, because a lot of what I did want to ask you, and maybe we'll do like a part 2 later, is how
we'll do a part 2. Why not?
Your journey fascinates me on a career level too. Like, how did you go from Rutgers to Alabama, and you're doing sideline reporting? Did you major in journalism? Like, there's all these other things I want to ask you too. Like, you're like, oh, I sent in an audition tape. From where? Where did you see it? Like, I love that kind of stuff, and I just think it's really cool that you got to do that.
Hey, you're going into reporter mode, and I love it.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's why I'm an interviewer too, I guess. Like, all those details are always like really fascinating to me. So I just think it's really cool that under the umbrella of that weight, you forged this path for yourself as a sideline SEC ESPN reporter. I also went to the University of Georgia, so I'm an SEC fan. In fact, I was going to ask you, but one of the other podcasters took my question. I was going to say, what is your favorite SEC team, and why is it the University of Georgia? I was going to ask you that, but some other guy did, but I think he said UNC or something. And I was like, damn, that was my joke.
Funny.
But I have heard your answer for everybody, which is I can't have a favorite.
Can't have a favorite. Yeah. Although I will wear Scarlet on my sleeve, because that's my team. My Rutgers, my Scarlet Knights will forever be at my, first in my heart.
Do they play? This is not meant to be rude. Are they D1 school? They play Division I football?
They're Big Ten.
Oh, okay. I'm an idiot. I should have known that.
Well, they were in the Big East. When I was in school. Okay. So of course most people will call that the Big East.
Right.
But then they transitioned to the Big
Big Ten.
So
okay, cool.
We're in Big Town football.
All right.
Trying to be relevant, and I have hope.
Okay.
I have hope.
Okay, cool.
Hope is alive.
Well, thank you so much, Lauren, for your time. I just appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much, and thanks for all that you do. I loved our conversation. And a quick shout out to Dawn Davenport.
Yeah, Dawn Davenport. Yeah, I've known her since I was 9 years old or something. Yeah, that's crazy. So,
mutual friends.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for the conversation, and I look